All right, we know the landscape for EV marketplace is hyper competitive. However, one company has truly differentiated themselves in the commercial vehicle and transportation sector. We're, of course, talking about Arrival, who we are so lucky to have today, the president of the company, Avinash Rugubar. A pleasure to have you. Alex and I have been looking forward to this for quite some time. We've been covering the company for a while. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me again.
Yeah, and it's a follow-up meeting to an interview that Alex has already done before, but there's a lot of great developments. So Alex, take it away.
Absolutely. And again, Avinash, I know that me and all of our followers were very grateful for you to have us. But again, to kind of review, because it's been a while since people have obviously seen the video, can you give us a little bit more of an overview of Arrival and what makes it different than any other EV manufacturer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for the benefit of just refreshing, we were founded in 2015, and we've been basically designing from the ground up the way to basically create best-in-class products, electric vehicles that are competitively priced with fossil fuel. And the reason for that is, there is this barrier to entry for the whole world to move to electric, which we all agree, we are going to have to get there, and zero emission vehicles in general. But there's a price barrier, particularly in our segment, the commercial vehicle segment, which has been, underserved. We've seen a lot of vehicles that are simply old architectures, 10 to 15 years, take the engine out, put a battery in, call an electric vehicle, right? For us, it was about designing what is the ideal vehicle that our commercial vehicle operators are going to need and designing around that. And to do that, we're heavily vertically integrated. So we do a lot of the components ourselves. We've created a new composite material for all of the body panels that's lighter and more durable than steel. And we're actually heavily software oriented as well. So we write all our software from the control layer to all of the things that the operator would use, like fleet telematics, vehicle health monitoring. All of our vehicles are essentially, we call them devices on wheels. So all connected, all the data is going up, and we're able to share that with our partners and also use it to improve the product. And we've pioneered a radical new method of producing the vehicles too, which are in local, low capex, low footprint microfactories, which is very unique to the industry. It's never been done before. And we really believe that that gives us a unique level of adaptability. So we can really create, when you look at the vertical integration that we've got, we can create products that suit our customers' needs, but we can also build them more efficiently in microfactories that are placed local to areas of demand. So we've already announced 4 of those, 2 in the US, in the Carolinas, 1 in the UK, and 1 in Madrid. And we'll be scaling those microfactories over the coming years. One of the beauties of it, not only is it low capex, but you can use existing warehouses. They're only around 20,000 odd square meters. So you can take existing warehouses and turn them into production facilities. So yeah, extremely unique. We're laser focused on the execution now. We have the trials of the bus commencing end of this year. We have then the van is already actually been doing private trials, but we'll be doing public trials early next year, and starter productions coming quickly as well into next year.
That's awesome. And to kind of go over it, because I remember this one key factor that really just drawn big attraction to me, to the company, as well as a lot of my followers, is the fact that you guys, in your process of building out, like using the microfactories, you guys kind of try to create a carbon zero, like net zero carbon emission. Can you go over that process a little bit before we dive into the more questions?
Yeah, sure. So I'll explain it. For example, if you look at our composite material, and there's some really cool YouTube videos out there that shows what we do, but
there are.
Yeah.
It's a lot like carbon fiber, right? It's kind of a woven fabric.
I think that's the key, right? It's actually fundamentally different from that because, as you know, carbon fiber is extremely expensive. Mm-hmm. But what we do is we take like polypropylene and glass fiber, readily available materials, and using our own process, we essentially make a fabric. Yeah. And that fabric we laser cut. And then we use our own internal IP to turn that into an extremely lightweight and extremely durable material that basically creates all of the body panels. There's some videos of trucks driving over them, and they're still alive. Yeah. So what's cool about that is like the operators spend less on repairing the panels, but they also break less. So you're saving on 2 sides. But it also means that we don't need a paint shop which is high capex, but also needs a lot of environmental certification. Alex, back to your point. Yeah. But also all of the offcuts, we can actually just recycle those and reuse them in the process. And all of the panels, if they are damaged, we can break those back down into the raw materials and use them again. So that's one example of 100%, recyclability. And if you think of the microfactory are placed in local areas of demand. So the ability, at a smaller footprint with a low energy requirement, the ability for us to use renewable sources to power the microfactory. And also we are focused heavily on minimizing waste to landfill and water usage. So this is really built into everything that we're doing, is what's the sustainability aspect. Even if I look at the vehicles, they can be upgraded over time. Those components I mentioned, as there's new tech, we can actually change them over. So what you're essentially doing, you're then extending the life of the vehicle as well. So all of that is, again, to how do you keep vehicles in life longer? How do you produce them more sustainably? How do you then recycle the materials that you're using more sustainably as well? So it's really built into our DNA, I would say.
Well, gosh, you guys are really raising the bar in, your industry, and I sure hope you're getting a lot of tax credits for all these ambitions you have. But so you've talked about the microfactories, and we know that Arrival's ambitiously laid out this rapid, expansion plan that consists of 31 different microfactories by 2024. The first two of which are almost completed. Are there any foreseeable challenges that might keep Arrival from delivering on all 31? You think of like construction projects, and most of them aren't completed on time. So,
yeah, I think ultimately, if you think about what a microfactory is, it's a blueprint for. They're all the same, essentially, right? You'll take, you might change a little bit based on the building, etc. But essentially, it's a blueprint. So what's really important for us is to get the first two and first 3 or 4 in our case, up and running. And then it becomes like pushing the button and pushing the button on scale. And the reason I say that is, if we were sitting here in the traditional way, we'd either already have committed billions of dollars in capital to a large factory, or we'd be sitting here planning out, what does the next 3 to 4 years need to look like? Because we have to go commit to that factory now. It's going to take 3 or 4 years to go and build and commission, and billions of dollars are going into that. For us, it's flexible. We essentially can say, all right, they're running, they're operating. Where do we want to go next? Where do we put these microfactories? And we can do all of those in parallel. You see what I mean? Like, instead of going one big factory, take 3 to 4 or 5 years to do with a lot of capex, we can essentially go, we've got the first few running, they're operating brilliantly, push the button, do them all in parallel. And that's why you see our ability to scale much more rapidly and with lower risk. We can decide where those microfactories need to be at the last possible minute. To your point, you've seen a lot of construction projects go wrong. Our aim is to use existing warehouses. And if they don't exist, maybe it's taking us 12 months, instead of 6 months to build a building. But essentially, it's a warehouse. It's 4 walls and a roof. It's actually much simpler problem to solve than if we were taking the traditional approach.
What's the timeline just to establish one of these things, the full operation?
So right now, I think the first few, we've brought a lot of we've sort of pulled ahead a lot of the initial installation of the robotics, etc., to this year. So it's happening right now. We've basically got all of the equipment either delivered or ordered, and we are in the midst right now of testing the physical cell to the simulated environment. That's tracking extremely well. So I would say the first one, it's 12 to 18 months, but after that, I really expect,
more finely tuned
effort. It's just, they're off-the-shelf robots. It's our control software. We've got incredible work going on the autonomous mobile robots. These are the little robots that are in the factory that feed the tech cell. Again, really cool YouTube videos out there on that. So, we control a lot of that IP and a lot of that tech. So it's really about taking your time to get the first ones right, and then, scale it.
Yeah, you don't want to rush it on that. You always, I understand the beginning, the first two, and you just want to make sure you have the process perfect, and then you'll be able to scale it out. Because
exactly right.
My thoughts when we talked last time was after everything is perfected, it's going to take you around 7 to 9 months to build out the microfactory from the beginning to production. So I understand.
I think the beauty thing there, Alex, is that it can all happen in parallel. I mean, that's the crucial thing. You're not necessarily needing to, stagger them out. You can just go, okay, we want the next 5. Let's go. We want the next 10.
Yeah, you're not just focusing on one. You're focusing on every single one. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. So obviously next week is the beginning of Q4. Is the company still on track for the van and the buses to execute trial testing and production you guys projected? So
we've got the private testing for the bus that's happening basically next quarter. As you mentioned, we are in the midst of building those. The saleable vehicles will come in Q2 of next year. Our van, we're doing a private test already. Q1, we start the public road trials for that. And in Q3, we have started production for that as well. So I would say, it's a busy time, but it's a really exciting time with all the vehicles being built, the microfactory being put together. So the company's in a really good position.
That's great. And I think that the biggest thing that people tend to forget is that you guys really adapt your vehicles to the people that are utilizing it. A lot of people be like, this is my design. I created it for you to adapt to it. It's no, our vehicle is adapting to you, whether it be the beta van. You guys obviously worked with UPS. I'm pretty sure other people that are working with you in order to adapt it and make it more comfortable for the everyday working man and woman. And for the Metropolitan bus, you guys are working for everything. You guys are making more spacious. You guys are making more disabled friendly. And I think that that's really attractive. And that's obviously a part of the trial testing. You guys always adapt and change it and make things work better. So I think that there's a lot more to your guys' trial testing than a lot others, and people need to keep that into their retrospect.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it really well. I mean, we've been designing this alongside UPS for years, actually. But, you mentioned a few others. So, for example, the trial we're doing for the buses is with First Bus, one of the largest operators in the UK. We recently also announced that we'll be bringing a bus to Anaheim. Our car program, we announced a partnership with Uber, and we have Uber drivers coming in and designing if you go into an Uber, you see that they take an existing vehicle and you kind of have phones everywhere, and it's just kind of not exactly the best experience. So that's on the inside, on the experience of the vehicle itself. But then it also extends outside of that into the depot environment. What's the sort of technologies needed in the depot environment? So we recently completed some autonomous testing, autonomous trials of our van running fully autonomously in the depot. That's a really quick path to market for autonomous technologies, because in a depot, it can be quite complex to move all the vehicles around. So, we're able to move it from charging station to cleaning station autonomously. And then if you start to think about then the systems and tools that have to enable something like a ride-sharing vehicle, that connectivity really starts to play in. But it's also for the small, medium enterprises, small business owners. When you have a van or a small fleet, it's really important that you know how each one is going, any issues you may get, what's their operating time, all of that is actually built into our software side. So all of the data is going up, and we have those tools for those folks as well. So you're right. But it's not just limited to the vehicle design, which in and of itself is unique to your point. It's the ecosystem around it that we design alongside our partners as well. And, I think it's really, really important to hear feedback from them because that's who you're making the vehicle for at the end of the day.
Absolutely agree.
Man, that's exciting stuff. So again, like Avinash said, check out their YouTube videos. There's a wealth of information there. I particularly enjoyed one of which where your chief of robotics, Napo Montano, talked about, the ability to have mobile robotics that are autonomously operating in the microfactories, as well as, he described the DNA of those microfactories as reactive, adaptable, and reconfigurable. So the concept of modularity, scalability, and automation in these small factories is just obviously simply brilliant. But how come other manufacturers haven't adopted this concept? On the surface, it feels like such a no-brainer.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think ultimately there is legacy built up in the system already, right? So if you're a traditional OEM and you've spent the billions on a large factory and a new vehicle platform's coming along, you need to amortize that investment. You can't afford to write it off. And many new players, what they do, they tend to start small, go get investment, either partner with someone who has that factory, or they go and buy one. And as soon as you've done that, you have locked yourself down a very particular path on how you design, develop, and build the product, right? So for us, we were self-funded for a long time. We had the time and the ability to really take a blank sheet of paper and redesign it from the ground up. And that meant really taking a look at, why do we produce vehicles in this way? Because in a legacy system, if you're not making hundreds of thousands of vehicles, you can't turn a profit, right? The economies of scale are built that way. And that just doesn't seem to make sense to me in the current world we're in. And you go around the world and you see, it doesn't matter if you're in Florida, you come to London, you go to Johannesburg, it's the same vehicles everywhere. Not because it's the right experience or the right product, it's because the manufacturing system has dictated that it has to be that way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense. So we really questioned that. We took that on us to question, why does production have to happen in that way? And so we reinvented, this legacy industry, which has served its purpose, but it's also run its course on optimization, right? You're getting minuscule gains now from that system. Whereas we're at the start of this journey. It took us a long time, right? We're 6 years in, but we've really found a unique method of producing vehicles. And you can't take an existing vehicle and build it in a microfactory. And this is where that vertical integration comes. If you look at, for example, how our components are, you look at our battery module, you look at our HMI module, they're all in, we call it the grid architecture. They're all essentially 10 by 10 by 10. They're like square boxes, right? The reason for that is a robot can pick it up, put it into its position and assemble it really easily. So the technologies that we've designed and developed enable us to produce the vehicle in a microfactory and vice versa, not just taking the existing vehicle as it is now and putting it, on an assembly line. You can't just take the vehicle and build it our way. So, we may have covered this last time, but if you take the lid off the microfactory, you have technology cells rather than a single speed assembly line. The AMRs that you're mentioning with Napo, who is amazing, by the way.
He is a great spokesman for the company too.
Yeah, great fashion too, I've heard. So.
Yeah, I wear pants like that on the weekend. Reminds me of MC Hammer.
Yeah. So those AMRs, normally what would happen is you've got a fixed line, and anything goes wrong, you stop the line and you try and adjust it. New product, retool. With the technology cells, we bring the parts to the cell performs an operation, those AMRs move it to the next cell. So you can imagine, even if a cell went down, for example, you would just reconfigure what the factory is doing, what the process looks like on the fly. Yeah. So we are literally at the start of a whole new journey. I often say that we're at a step change, right? Once you've built a vehicle using a microfactory, you've transformed the industry.
Oh yeah, you're revolutionizing the manufacturing process. Well, just to put it in other words, and correct me if I'm wrong. So instead of your traditional assembly line, you guys essentially have cubicles, factory cells, right? So
we call them tech cells. Exactly right.
But so if you think of square footage of a traditional manufacturing plant, we're talking the size of a few football fields. What's the square footage of the factory cells needed to produce a vehicle?
Square footage for us in a microfactory, I'm just trying to convert square meters. It's about 200 to 250,000 square foot.
Okay, so but still relatively much smaller than a traditional plant.
It's a warehouse.
The startup cost to roll one of these things out, it's under $50 million, right?
Exactly, and that's a significant difference. If you were to just look at the capex required to produce the similar amount in a typical plant, you'd be looking at less than half the capital.
And you're producing upwards of 10,000 units or vehicles in a single year.
Per microfactory. So really,
that's remarkable.
It really is incredible.
The economics are, quite frankly, as sexy as it gets for the industry. Hence, you guys are just breaking all the rules, and we're disruptive. Our company's disruptive, and man, you're epitomizing that in every regard with your microfactory. So that's just awesome.
And to kind of
add on to it, break that up, you've got the cost savings on the microfactory, the production itself. On the components, because we design and build them ourselves, we can optimize the cost there. We have the composite materials that don't use steel, so metal stamping plants, hundreds of millions of dollars, paint shops, we don't need them. When you add all of that in, that's that vertical integration that gets us to that competitive price point. That's why, if you're an operator, when you look at an arrival vehicle, you can essentially say, I don't have to sort of make the choice between spending more and getting electric or going cheaper and getting diesel. That's bad for the environment. I can essentially get a best-in-class product at a similar price point to what I was going to pay. But it's because we control the costs across all those different things you mentioned.
And these EV buses, from what I gather, are incredibly expensive to develop, at least for your competitors. But it sounds like this, the economics of your manufacturing process give you a huge strategic edge to be able to deliver, a comparable, if not, superior product, but at a more affordable price or a better bang for your buck, per se.
Absolutely. I mean, on the bus, it's significant. And what I would say is, it's not just the microfactory, those components. Our battery modules are used in our bus, our van, our car, the human machine interface box, same thing, and so on and so forth. The motors, in the van, we've got 2, in the bus, we have 4. Like, it's like Lego, for lack of a better word, right? It's all this toolkit that you're just assembling in different form factors. That's why we can do a bus, a van, a car, and really any vehicle we want.
I think I just want to add on to the microfactory just one more thing. There's one more aspect that I think that we're not really paying attention to and bringing onto it is the fact that for the price of one single, let's say a gigafactory, for the price of that, you can potentially make 3 to 4 microfactories, and you can place them specifically and strategically next to companies that'll work for you. So obviously lower in capex, technically for a single one, but for the same price point, 4 different locations, and you'll be able to also drop down on operational costs in order to deliver the vans, because the companies will be right there. So it's smarter strategically to do these type of things for lower capex, quicker from building out the factory to getting it to the customer. And
just one correction though, Alex. It's if you call a regular factory $1 billion, you would get 20 microfactories from it, not.
Oh yeah.
That's true.
So
I undercut obviously the price point. So that's brilliant. So that's even more someone that needs to pay attention to is the fact that you guys are using your money in the best way possible. You want to have a quick return of an investment and make it more efficient.
And we're extremely capital efficient.
Geographically, you're everywhere.
Yeah, well, that's the point too, right? So on capital efficiency, if you think about how much technology we've developed in the time we've been around with the 2,000 odd employees we have, it's incredible. Our P portfolio is over 200 patents, for example. If you think about what you just said, Alex, the microfactory has a few key benefits. One, we've talked about the ability to scale. The second is the capital, as you mentioned. Third is what Dana just mentioned. You can put them anywhere, right next to the areas of demand. Fourth, though, you're really uplifting the local community that they're served in, right? So you're hiring local. In the Charlotte microfactory, for example, we're hiring local folks. But imagine that replicated. One near Miami, one near LA, anywhere around the US or the rest of the world. Hiring the local talent, building the local, let's take the buses that then the community is riding on, customized for that local area. I mean, it really is, like I said, it's a step change.
Absolutely, no question. So Arrival plays a critical role in the UK innovation and transportation sector. Can you speak to the UK's investment in collaborative R&D work to date, as well as the consortium of organizations that your team is working with?
Yes, I think, as you mentioned, we do have a significant presence in the UK. I like to think of us as a global tech company, obviously. But in particular in the UK, for example, we work with an organization called Innovate UK and the Center for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles. That's called CCAV. And that's that autonomous depot that I was mentioning. That's actually was done with a consortium within the UK government. And so, for example, grants there, we've total about £6 million, the total project being about £13 million. Wow. Partly funded by CCAV, so 50% grant rate. And that's got Arrival, TALS, TESOLVE, academic partners, different universities like the University of Bristol. And so we also have potential end customers, right? When you think about UPS and insurer, AXA's involved, there's 9 official partners. So when you think about all of that, we have the ability to develop projects alongside consortiums, alongside government funding that really helps to sort of leverage the the bang for your buck, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, like, how does Arrival like mature its rotopilot technology to ensure the regulations enables the new technologies, as well as how easy will it be able to like scale out the robopilot technology across your platforms?
Well, the good thing is, if you think about depot autonomy, what we've got is essentially a controlled environment. You know, you have clear line markings for the path. You know exactly where you need to get to. It doesn't move. The depot doesn't reconfigure itself. So you know exactly what the position is of all the different areas you need to go to. So it means that rollout is actually relatively straightforward. I mean, it's technology that you need today, that you've got today that can roll that out. And I think it's also important in the commercial vehicle world. The human side will continue to play a really important role in this, right? You know, you have bus drivers who do more than just drive the bus. They're also one of the safety aspects of a bus, right? You have, for example, delivery vehicles, you still need somebody to move the packages around, right? And still drive as well. So we're not really, our initial focus is on that depot autonomy. And I think that rollout is a critical and important rollout for the commercial vehicle segment. So I think that's where we are spending majority of our time. And then we're creating technologies around an autonomous platform that, you know, we can use partnership models, for example, as the technology develops. But as mentioned in our segment, I think the depot autonomous is where we're going to get the most gains from a safety perspective, but also from an operational perspective for the customers that we have.
That's fantastic. Well, and you've talked about, you know, your partnership with UPS that you guys had for a couple of years now. We know that the company's carried out, you know, in-house testing with your van. What feedback did your team receive from like UPS?
We get a lot, you know, from down to where the step height needs to be, how we lay out the shelves, how reconfigurable we can make the shelving, the driver apps. So really, the feedback has been incredible. And since commencing the physical trials, the driving trials, we've had a very positive feedback from UPS since commencing that in July. And we've been doing proving grounds, we've been doing depot, driver evaluations. Actually, our van will actually be at the Dubai World Expo alongside UPS, which starts in a week, next week. And so
congrats.
You know, we're highlighting that together. Thanks. Yeah, that's going to be exciting. The van's already there, obviously. And then, you know, alongside UPS, we've also had folks like LeasePlan just announced that they'll be purchasing initial order of 3,000 vans from us. We're going to be focusing on Europe. It's also a partnership for operational leasing provider. I mentioned Anaheim earlier on the bus. You know, alongside that, in Q2, we saw the increase of non-binding LOIs go up to 59,000 units, which is a 4-time increase year to date. More vehicle variants. We've got interest in global markets for vehicles that are very specific for local environments. So we announced an R&D center in India. You know, we've really seen this EV industry just gain rapid momentum in 2021. You know, it's governments, it's investors, it's just society, people in general, it's the operators. I think everybody realizes that this transition needs to happen, and we believe it's happening faster than originally expected.
Well, isn't it fair to say too that, you know, because your vans and vehicles are, you know, reconfigurable, they have all this modularity, and then your process, of course, for building these things, you're able to cater your vehicles to meet the needs of your customers. Right?
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. So that feedback can be turned around really quickly into the products. You know, as I mentioned, we're going through that right now. We have Uber drivers on the car. We'll have the trials in early next year for the bus. Like, it's really very much to your point. We can feed that back in and make the adjustments.
Well, and then, you know, obviously, I'd love to ask you, hey, are there any other companies or municipalities interested in your vehicle? Maybe you can answer that, but if you can't, you know,
Yes.
like, who do you think, well, if you can't, like, who is your customer? Like, what's the profile of your customer? You guys aren't going after, like, consumers. Feels like urban trucks and utility vehicles, transport sector.
Yeah. So look, the short answer to are people interested in microfactories is yes. Where does that start and stop? I would say it's global. If you can imagine back to the earlier point about the ability to bring manufacturing, not just to a country, but to literally a city, you can imagine there is significant interest in where we deploy our microfactories. So I think that is another strategic quiver in our bow, I would say, when you think about, potential for not just uplifting the local community and providing the vehicles, but then what does that mean in terms of potential incentives that you can get around those different microfactories, the speed we can roll that out. I think, again, it's very unique. We're not having the auction model, which is, hey, we've got this big, huge factory, who wants it? We can help one area, and more than likely it's in the middle of nowhere. We're like, we can come to your city and deploy that microfactory right there. And so then you can start to work with the city, like, for example, Charlotte, what's the mobility system need to look like over time, and start to develop what that system together with the city that you're partnered with. So it really is, again, quite an incredible,
it's almost a approach. Social aspect of your business. Not only are you able to deliver your vehicles, but you're stimulating excitement and growth and infrastructure within the cities that you guys choose to operate in, which you can't say that for any other manufacturer, which is...
Well, we like to say it's good for people, business, and planet. So everybody should benefit from it. And if you get that,
that's the trifecta.
That's the trifecta, right? You've sort of crossed off all the major things. And we should also be aware that there's that societal part to this where if, for example, only part of the world moves to electric, we don't solve the issue.
Yeah.
Right? We need everybody to transition, and and that's why that local partnership is so important, because what might work somewhere doesn't work in another city. And being able to work with the city to make it, really purpose built for that environment, I think is crucial. Even if you take microfactories, there'll be some places where there's a ton of sun and you can lay out solar, and other places where you'll have to look at a different approach. So, decentralizing it, I think, really is advantageous. And on the customer profile, right now the team's focused on the direct fleets, the large corporate customers, but ultimately they represent a small part of the market. In many regions, they're only 70-80% is actually small, medium enterprise.
Yeah.
So, it's great names. It's great for us to focus. It helps us develop the right product, but we're really are building something that's also for the small, medium enterprise, right? It's also for the person who runs a florist or a bakery and wants to transition to being electric, looks at some of the price points and thinks, geez, there's no way this makes sense for my business. He or she can now look at a vehicle and say, okay, it's competitive price, it's lower cost to own. It's built right in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
I want to transition to it.
And to add into that is that Arrival obviously is focusing on a sector that's really been overlooked for the electrification transition. Yeah. A lot of these major corporations, from obviously UPS and a couple other companies, they say that they want to go to electrification, but where's your money? Put your money where your mouth is. And they need to find the best and quickest possible option. And you guys create that. I don't know any other company that will literally take steps and fix it and transition it and mold it to the company for what they need. And I'm very excited. A lot of people know me, they follow us, they know that we talk about a lot on the consumer vehicles. There's a lot of competition there. People really overlook the commercial fleets, and to be able to go towards the commercial fleets, they work with the delivery vans, things that actually touch everyone's lives, like obviously Amazon, all these companies that go and deliver everyone's houses, UPS, FedEx, DHL, you name it, to be able to really use your vans as like a statement, as a mission, and showing this is what we can do for you, will actually push us towards that electrification transition that we all know and want. And it's being shown by the investments, not only in Europe and in Asian countries, but also the United States. We're going into it now with the infrastructure bill. So I think that being able to position yourselves like that and work with companies like UPS and potentially future partners is really going to be able to really hit your guys' mission goal. And I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, I mean, you said it well. I mean, we need the whole commercial vehicle segment, which is critically underserved, right, to move to modern, connected, smart, low cost, zero emission vehicles. And we needed it yesterday. but we believe we are at the premier, we're at the forefront of making that transition possible, also from a commercial standpoint. And we've also mentioned the local production standpoint.
Absolutely. So obviously we talked about you guys came out with a press release a couple months ago about your partnership with Microsoft. Can you speak on that existing partnership and how Arrival will be using Azure to manage data?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just before I get into that, I think it also shows the capability of Arrival when you look at the types of partnerships that we've been working on.
Very diverse.
Very diverse. We've got UPS, Hitachi, LeasePlan, we've got Uber, and we've also announced Microsoft amongst others. And I think it shows how we're looking at the problem as an end-to-end problem, and not just, hey, we need to make a vehicle, but if we're going to transition this, we need to be thinking about also how those vehicles go into use, how they're built, how they're recycled, like we've covered. And in this particular one with Microsoft, if you can imagine all of the vehicles that we have, they're all connected. All that data is going up to the cloud. It's really important to have responsible use of that data. And with Microsoft, obviously with Azure, but also a lot of their AI ML capability, they're at the forefront of enabling this customer and partner ecosystems to make effective use of their data. So by working closely with them, we're able to develop and then demonstrate the huge advantages of having an open data platform with the right privacy settings, all of the necessary aspects to that, and then able to even add the sharing of that for vehicles, fleets, and cities and companies, all to share in that data. I think that's truly groundbreaking. So with Azure, with the machine learning and working together to create the open data platform, we also then get to extract the right insights, right, from the data.
Absolutely.
You combine that to edge computing, you minimize the vehicle to cloud data flow. You can imagine how much data you end up kicking off. So you get to really understand what's needed, what's not. So you can really enable advanced uses of the telemetry, vehicle and fleet data management systems across the whole fleet. Imagine the power, not just for the large fleet, but for the small, medium enterprises that has this sort of powerful open data platform. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
You're busy, man. It's all good.
I'll say that again. So yeah, you can imagine the power for not just the large companies, but the small vehicle, the small, medium enterprises, small fleets to get access to that data, but also the city, where the vehicle's going, how they're being used. Have we structured the sort of mobility ecosystem correctly? Insurers, right? And you can start to see that it can increase the utility of that shared data, and it's a foundation for multiple different stakeholders.
Yeah, so in a sense, Azure is like the glue to your ecosystem. It's driving all the value. That's just remarkable. Have you guys already put that in motion? I mean,
it's in development. So we're working with them. It's in development. We obviously already have all of the components sending the data.
Yeah.
Now it's about putting that, and we have all the open APIs. So it's very easy for us to plug into that data. So now it's about creating the sort of open data platform layer, so to speak, that allows other companies to then interact with that data most efficiently and gain the insights.
So to kind of add on to this, like this, if people aren't already catching on to this and listening to you, and obviously listen to my last interview with you, is that when it comes to Arrival, and you guys are just everything from your partnerships to the way that you build out your microfactories to now the data that you're working with Microsoft, it's all about efficiency. You want to be efficient. And I think that people realize is that like that's exactly what we need. And a lot of companies that do this, they don't care. It's like, here's my van, go and do what you will. I made my capital. You can do what you want. If you need maintenance, call me, call my OEM people, and that's it. But you guys are really trying to make everything as efficient as possible because that's what we need. That's what the everyday person needs. That's what the world needs. And I think that that's brilliant. And I think that I commend you guys for doing that.
Well, I think it's like you can develop the vehicles, but the real value is in the ecosystem.
Yes.
Exactly.
Man.
And I think that's a missed point in the commercial vehicle segment. So, I
totally.
would say the 3 E's, right? You've got the efficiency, you've got the experience. That's really important too. I mean, I don't want it to feel like, when you go on a bus, you're like, oh, I gotta get on the bus, right? I want it to be like, wow, what an amazing experience that I can have. Even, the the bus trip feels like an exciting part of my day rather than not, right? And what does that mean? That means, again, you talk about ecosystem as the third E. The bus knows where it is. It knows it has all the data. It's a device on wheels. If you've seen our bus, you'll see, really large windows for light and safety. We've got a moonroof essentially all the way through. Outdoor screens and indoor screens, geolocated. I mean, the ecosystem play then moves on to the software. So when you own an Arrival vehicle and you own the fleet, having the right software that lets you plug in to how that fleet is operating on a day-to-day, that's the next part. And it's good commercial sense too, because then you have the recurring revenue that comes from the software side. And I think we can all agree that if one thing's vehicles aren't really doing well, it's being part of the digital ecosystem like, our devices are.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the software sucks generally, right? So for us, I think it's important to really bring it to 2021, 22 levels. And then, like you said, the data then gives insights. So ecosystem.
Well, so we know that approximately like 80% of the LOIs and initial orders are for the van. And it feels like there's, a long-term growth opportunity for Arrival's buses, especially considering, the landscape is relatively small right now. So how does like Arrival compete with the likes of Proterra? We know that there's high development costs with the bus that you guys are able to avoid. What advantages does Arrival have over its competitors?
I think we mentioned a few of them. So we've got the experience, I think, is one that's ultimately important. Price point, obviously. I mean, without a doubt, we expect to be the most competitively priced electric bus out there. When you think about the level of tech we're bringing for that price point, I mean, it really is incredible. Built locally, as you can imagine, most bus operators form either part of the government or have a local establishment. And as far as we can tell, none of the competitors are using the unique method that we've got to design and manufacture the vehicles. So that vertical integration, look, we don't really focus on what our peers are doing, but we know that vertical integration really brings something very unique. And as you mentioned, there's a long-term growth opportunity. If you think about the number of buses around the world that need to shift to electric and what the current price points are for the typical electric bus, I mean, for us, I believe that that's a huge opportunity for us to capture market share over the next few years. And a lot of that's driven by the commonality that we mentioned. We use the batteries, the motors, all of that technology is the same as the van and the car. So we're literally just repackaging it. So there's cost savings there that our competitors can't really gain, right? We're able to use that and the learning and technology uplift you get from the different vehicles in the portfolio into the bus. So, yeah, go ahead.
Let me ask just a hypothetical here. Well, you think about, all right, I live in Seattle, Washington here in the States, and we got hundreds of these metro buses, all combustible engines, that are basically going to go to a graveyard one day. It's not like they're going to recycle the shell of this thing. You think of like what Arrival's doing with its modular components, you probably will be able to just like have a longer lifespan for these vehicles because you're able to just simply swap out, key things that may, tire over time, like battery, right?
Battery, little things. If we moved from, 4G to 5G to 6G, vehicles can't handle that. If you move from Bluetooth Low Energy to another standard, vehicles currently can't handle that, right? But so for us, you just switch it out. You put
there's a longer lifetime value, I guess.
Lifetime.
Which is,
and you think of the panels, the way it sort of clips on, all of our sort of panels clip onto the body. You could refresh the shape as well, so very cheap, unique ways of keeping that vehicle on life longer. But the data, having the data and knowing how they're operating on a day-to-day also keeps it in life longer, because if you do see an issue, you can do predictive health monitoring, right? You can see that something might happen, bring a vehicle in, make sure it's good before sending it back out. And that, again, you can't do that with a diesel bus.
No.
Yeah, you wait for them to break.
Well, and there's probably a threshold where you guys are able to say at this point, this thing just, the math pencils in ways that you only wish they did with all these traditional buses. So it's like a no-brainer. You don't even have to be a salesman. You just walk in, here's the spreadsheet, boom.
Yeah, well, exactly. It is all spreadsheet driven. That's what I like about the commercial vehicle market. It's very practical, right? It's very much built on data and operational costs. Allows us to focus our technology very specifically on what problems we're trying to solve. Even if you think of like charging infrastructure, you know where the depots are. You're upgrading the depots, right? It's more controlled environment for us to launch into. And Alex made the point earlier, when you have the data, you're also able to bring insights that you just wouldn't have them right now. You just do not know where you're leaking cash on your business, right? In terms of the vehicle side of it, if you're an operator, so we can bring that insight in.
Absolutely. So you spoke about this earlier in the interview, obviously. You spoke about Uber and you talked about your partnership there. What are you comfortable sharing about the forthcoming like Arrival car and the partnership with Uber?
Yeah, so what I can tell you is it's a purpose-built electric vehicle for ride-hailing drivers, ride-hailing, ride-sharing. We expect to enter production in the latter half of 2023. We're also exploring a strategic relationship with Uber for UK, Europe, and the US. So that vehicle is really addressing that need. There's an estimated 30 million drivers across the sector. We need them to shift to electric. Right now, we mentioned this earlier, you sort of take an existing vehicle and you sort of try and double it up as a ride-sharing vehicle. But we know that if you think about a taxi, let's call it for ease, they need efficiency, they need to reduce costs, they ride a lot of kilometers, right? 45 to 50,000 kilometers a year versus 10 to 15,000 for a typical vehicle. It has more in common actually with a commercial vehicle than it does a retail vehicle. So the opportunity for Arrivals to work with Uber, they join the design process, ensure the vehicle meets their needs. We can also invite other ride-hailing companies to that and really build what is essentially going to continue to be a key part of mobility in cities, right? It's not going anywhere. It's only growing. And, it helps us to hopefully also continue to create the right product that can reduce car ownership where required by building these purpose-built vehicles that, lower cost to operate, get all the data that you need to manage your own little fleet or your own individual vehicle. But it also goes to the back end to Uber to look at how they get with that more insight into how the fleet's operating. So that should result in better service, more equitable service across different cities and towns, which can be underserviced and really gives us, I think, a unique advantage. We're one of the only, if not the only, company, I think, that can create that type of vehicle because of what we mentioned, the ability to produce it, still be profitable, do it locally, like we mentioned earlier. So I think it's really a vehicle that is very purpose-built for a unique growing market that the typical segment can't attack. I say it like that because you can imagine with Arrival's technology with Arrival's technology capability that we've built, there's multiple versions of those, right? This is one specific, with Uber and what we're seeing, but you can imagine, why do all the buses have to be the size they are, for example, in all cities? How does that start to adjust? And why do delivery vehicles need to be specific sizes, shapes, etc.? How much could you change that? And you could start to see how thinking over time and how we'll be able to really capture market share in different parts of the segment by really addressing the needs of our customers.
I want to make sure that the followers and people that are listening pay attention to this, is that obviously we're talking about Uber, but this is the adaptability of Arrival is countless, limitless. You guys can adjust anything that you want. Whether it be, obviously this is pure speculation, working with Uber is not going to be the same as working with yellow cab taxi or whatever. I don't whatever the taxi service is in UK, whatever they need, whatever they want, whatever space they want, whether it be a van or just a regular sedan, you name it, you guys can make the adjustments and make it work together. This is exactly what we need. So that's absolutely brilliant, because people, again, like I've seen a lot of in New York City, I see a lot of taxi services buying the Tesla Model 3, the Tesla Model Y. They're buying those, and because there is obviously a demand for that, but the maintenance on that is going to be completely critically higher than would be working with the likes of Arrival. If it bangs up or breaks, you're going to have to wait, and they have to mold more metal. That's going to actually cause more carbon pollution. Also, who's to say down the road the battery loses its efficiency? Studies show that over the like 8 to 10 years lifespan of electric vehicle right now on the consumer base, it loses more than, like, it drops below 80% of efficiency. You guys can go, all right, you're losing efficiency, we'll take that battery, here's a new battery, and then we'll use whatever you have, and you guys could potentially, again, you guys haven't stated this, you guys can potentially use that as an energy storage facility in the future. It's limitless. So that's again, I commend you guys for that. This is what everyone needs, and it's being seen with the likes of Uber, UPS, First Bus, you name it, and more partners in the future. So
I'll leave one with you on that car, for example. We are spending a lot of time figuring out how do you clean the interior. And we for example, in ride sharing, there is a specific standard that you need to keep, right, with the interior. But if you look at the materials and the layout of the interiors of a typical retail car, keeping that clean is not easy. The driver is spending a lot of time and money just on maintaining the vehicle. We can look at that and say, have we picked the right choice of materials, for example, in the interior? Are they easy to clean? Do we have sort of little gaps and stuff that dust is going to build up? Let's wipe those out. They might have made a specific reason in a retail vehicle that makes no sense in a ride-sharing vehicle. And that's, again, that design process, you start to optimize the metric of, okay, we keep it clean, we do it as quickly and as efficiently and low cost as possible. What does that then mean for the design brief and as we design that vehicle? But we're able to do that.
Well, it feels like all of your partnerships are so mutually beneficial. With Uber, they're able to get all these tremendously great insights, as you guys are as well. And then there's that joint alliance on how do we develop this to optimize the needs of Uber and potentially the entire rideshare market. I think it's brilliant, and another reason why Arrival truly is just an outlier amongst all these other EV companies who they don't have any real distinguishable differences like you guys.
Yeah, we agree. And I think it shows in the partnerships, because those partnerships are big partnerships. And as you mentioned, they're win-win. It's very different to the typical, Alex said it earlier, here's my van, just take it, I've got my money. Yeah, it's very different to that. How to grow together.
If the car is successful, which it will be, because you've got the insights to finally tune it, right? Could you see Arrival inevitably somewhere down the road rolling out a consumer-driven vehicle? I mean,
so I would say it like this: there is a lot to do in the commercial vehicle segment to really transition it fully to electric. Yeah. But the vertical integration that we've got isn't limited to any segment.
Like it. It's awesome.
It's unlimited in scope, is what I would say.
Well, I had the weirdest dream the other night about the replacement of HOV carpool lanes for just autonomous electric vehicles that are on this kind of configurable grid. And, I woke up thinking, gosh, that could be the way of the future. I mean, it makes total sense. But maybe Arrival's the one that pioneers that.
So, So obviously, Avinash, we appreciate you jumping on and talking to us. But I remember, just like the last interview, I would like to give you some time. If there's anything that investors or the community needs to hear about Arrival, what would you want them to know?
I think that we are fundamentally different because we've been thinking about this problem from the ground up since the time we were founded. and that we've had the time to go away and develop real technology. I mean, I wish that people could see inside the factory, and we're going to show a lot more around that just the level of technology that goes behind Arrival. I mean, you know, you've heard from Napo, but that's just one area in the robotics. You know, if you look at the composite work that we've done, if you look at the components work we've done, the software work that we've done, the microfactory, you know, putting that all together, we are not like anybody else. So from a business perspective, the ability for Arrival to scale, I think, is unmatched at lower capital. That's one. With higher profit margins on the vehicle because we control the cost. Then the second part is the societal impact of what we're doing is local and it's real. It's the development of the right vehicles for the right cities, but it's also the production of those vehicles in local microfactories that are lower cost, hiring local people, paying local taxes. And when you add those two things together, I'll go back to what I said earlier. Arrival is a step change for the industry. I fundamentally believe that once we do what we basically build those vehicles out of a microfactory, which is happening very shortly, the industry has fundamentally transformed.
Yeah, you're rewriting all the rules.
You're rewriting all the rules.
Sure nice to be the author, right? Well, we couldn't be more grateful again for your time. I think you've said it all. I know that this particular interview and what you've shared today is going to capture a lot of enthusiasm with our followers and beyond. So thank you again to you and your team. And of course, whenever the door is open, Alex and I definitely would love to come see one of these microfactories in person. I encourage everyone to check out Arrival's YouTube channel. There's just so many cool videos we're able to see and learn up close everything that they're doing, all the little nuances. So thank you again. And hopefully we'll connect again soon in the near future.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much.
Bye, Avinash.
Thanks, guys.